Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Eiffel Tower podcast. My name is Oliver G, coming at you from Montmartre. Hang on. No, I'm not. I'm sitting right beside the Eiffel Tower. I appear to have moved house. More on that at the end of the episode. But what you're going to hear now is all about food. A food conversation. I know there are a lot of foodies out there. And one of them is Lachlan Cook, who I want to give a shout out before I do anything. An email dropped into my inbox, said, "Hello from Seattle, this is Lachlan Cook. I heard you mention that your sponsor for the Eiffel Tower had jumped off from the podcast due to the pandemic, and that won't do it all. Can I personally sponsor an episode about food? I'm a huge fan of the Paris restaurant scene." I got in touch with Lachlan, we discussed it, I said, why not? So it's thanks to him that I decided to go down a food alley this week, and I'm glad I did because I got the chance to chat with Alec Lobrano, an American and acclaimed restaurant critic from the US. We chatted via Zoom, by the way, and this was just before I left Montmartre, and we talked about how the lockdown is affecting his job. We talked about the restaurant industry, Paris restaurants. There's a cool bit in there where he talks about how he thinks that they're like theatres. That was fun to hear. I think you're going to like that too. And we also talked about which restaurant he'd dine in if it was his last day in Paris. So why wait? Let's get into it. Alec Lobrano, you've probably heard of him before if you like restaurants and restaurants reviews, because he has done a lot of them. He's got a new book coming out. You'll hear more about that too. But I'll be back at the end chatting with you about everything. Thanks again to Lachlan for the episode. Here comes Alec Lobrano. Let's get into it. Alec, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me from essentially the other side of the big boulevard in Pigalle and Montmartre, right?
I'm just down the hill from you. Exactly.
We could lean out of our windows on the top floor.
If we had megaphones or something, we could call back and forth.
I was thinking if we had those cans with the string in it.
Tin cans with a string, exactly.
That could be a whole new podcast. We'll think about it. But
retro technology.
Exactly right. You're in the ninth. You're like a food critic, a food writer.
I'm a food writer and a restaurant critic. And I was for 10 years. I was the European editor for Gourmet magazine, which was the most famous food and travel magazine in the U.S. Until Condé Nast killed it off. And those were pretty great years. You know, when I got that job, I was walking on a beach in Florida and told my dad about it. I was really excited about it. He looked at me with a strange expression on his face and he said, "When did you become so interested in food and why?" And I said, "Oh gosh, I don't know. Probably when I was about 6 months old. And food's the best way to approach a culture you don't know, because I don't need to speak that language. I mean, we all eat 3 times a day if we're lucky. I think it's the most intimate, unthreatening, revealing, sensual, friendly way to discover a culture you don't know."
So interesting. So France is famous, obviously, for its food. Is this kind of the jackpot country to be living in when it comes to being a restaurant critic?
I think it still is, actually. It's it's funny because I think that in the last couple of years, since 2000 maybe, there's great food now in America, Australia, the UK, countries that did not have gastronomic traditions before. And there's been this schadenfreude, or this desire to see France get kicked in the shins. But I think just now, as we're kind of like ankle deep into our new century, that what France has always offered and will always offer is really deeply valued again, which is this amazing gastronomic education of the chefs, incredible produce, an incredibly gastronomically literate public, a whole society that is deeply involved and committed to eating well for reasons of pleasure and health and the environment.
Do you find it like extremely different to where you're from in the States?
Oh, wow. Well, I grew up in New England. And New England, if the food in America was problematic when I was little, I mean, in New England, you ate because you had to eat, and it was supposed to be wholesome. Today, there's great food there, too. But, I mean, it was almost considered as, that's where the demented pilgrims first climbed out of a boat. And then they were religious crackpots. So what do you want from them? They didn't care about food. They hated pleasure. And that kind of reiterated through generations of people in a cold, dark corner of North America.
Wow.
Where they just ate to eat. And so there was always this, as I had this love of food and take great pleasure from it, it was always threatening to my family. I mean, as I mentioned before about my father, there was this, sort of puzzlement about, well, where did this come from? It was almost, they were almost embarrassed by it. That being said, my dad's family is from New Orleans. And so the other side of my coin is Bostonian mom and father's family from New Orleans, which is fun-loving, Latin roots, great eating, let the good times roll type of a place.
Interesting. That's so it's so interesting. There's got a million questions I want to ask, but I do also want to get around to how it is to be a food writer in Paris. But first, a question: like, I like food, but I'm not like you, and I know that there's probably a scale of people from like maybe some of your family members who eat to eat, and then some people who just adore food. I don't know where I'm in the scale, but I'm probably closer to the middle than closer to you. But so the question is, for people who come to France and who are like, well, where do I get started? Where's a good place to start in French food for a non-crazy foodie?
I think the best thing to do, what I do when I was living as a student in London and came to France, and we had no money. What amazed us here was the bread. I mean, whatever it cost them, like 20, 50 centimes for a baguette, it's the best bread any of us had ever eaten in our lives. We, even then, when we had no money, we picnicked like all back, rucksack travelers do. We bought cheese, and that food at the most primal level just knocked us out, because this stuff was so good. It was so full of flavor. There was so much variety. How do you choose from, we go into a cheese shop, and in America in those days, we had like 5 cheeses. And this was, and the knowledge of the fussy ladies behind the counter when we'd say, well, what's that? And they'd say, well, that's a sheep milk. And I'd think, God, I didn't even think that sheep had made milk. There's all these like weird, dumb thoughts flowing through my head. But to answer your question, I'd start with the basics. I'd start with cheese. I'd start with bread. I'd start with, all of the produce here. I mean, in French schoolrooms, there used to be maps on the wall of France with pictograms of the different foods for which each region was famous. So the kids grew up knowing this. So that when you said you were going to Brittany, they'd say, oh, you're going to eat oysters. Or I'm going to go see my grandmother in the Southwest, and that would be the area where there were little ducks walking along, which meant foie gras and cassoulet and all this stuff. In France, it starts with the produce, and I think that the basic plain food here is just extraordinary.
Right. I think we could do full episodes on this kind of stuff, and I think we should today. But let's talk about being, your job, I would imagine, relies on restaurants being open.
Yeah.
So,
it does. Well, it's really interesting. Since, in a way, we're living this thing right now. And one thing that's occurred to me, and I'm not going to say there's a silver lining to what we're going through, because that's not the right way of describing it. What I have more of now than I've had in probably 30 years is time. And so it's made me very meditative about what my work actually is. And in terms of restaurants, I miss the food a lot, because I'm cooking 2 meals a day here, and I'm a good cook, but after a while it gets tiresome. I really miss the food. I miss the creativity. But what I miss most of all is Paris. I miss every restaurant is a theater. And every time you go to a restaurant, it's like going into a little theater, and you become part of a play, and you overhear things, and you see amazing faces, and you see little dramas going on at corners of the room. My love of restaurants is as much for the human comedy side of the whole thing as it is for the food. The food is first. But I think it's also because these are cameos of life in a big city that I chose, the big city where I chose to make my home in, which I love so much. And restaurants also I learned Paris through restaurants. That's how, when I didn't know anyone when I was here and had to go out, and finally got myself together to go and have a meal alone in a restaurant, which was not something I was used to doing. And I watched people, and I overheard them, and I learned how to order a meal, and I learned the rhythms of a French sense of humor, and I learned all that stuff. So what I really miss, I miss the Parisians, and I miss the Parisian life, and I miss the city desperately. I mean, it's and the food, as I said, of course. But every little restaurant is. I mean, it's just the joy of it. It's a little, as I said, it's like a little cameo of Parisian life, and I miss that every day.
Do you think that, there's a lot of talk of when the restaurants reopen, they might be, I don't know what the word is, but kind of halved in a way, as in they're going to have to separate people. What does that make you think? I mean, like the way you just described Parisian restaurants was lovely, but it won't be like that for a while, right? How does that make you
I'm afraid not. No, I don't know how they're going to be able to do it because, this is a dense old European city. It's not a big sprawling country like America or Australia where you could maybe leave a table empty between a table. They couldn't do that here. It wouldn't be economically feasible for them. They wouldn't make enough money to stay in business. The idea of, in like some of these tiny little bistros that we like so much in our neighborhood, the idea of hanging plastic sheets or something from the roof would be a horror. I don't know how they're going to do this. I think that the restaurants that will recover fastest will be the ones that are sort of huge, well-financed groups like, the brasserie chains or Alain Ducasse or something like that, because they have deep pockets. What I worry for me and you as Parisians is I worry about the little places because, their margins are paper thin. Those guys are barely making any money anyway. They're doing it because they love it. 2 months, so the government reacted really harshly, didn't give them time to empty their fridges or even cancel their food orders. They had to, get rid of all that food so it wasn't wasted, shut their businesses down, and that just, you're stuck in midair. Now you haven't been in business for 2 months. You've lost 2 months worth of revenue during a time of the year when the tourist season is cranking back up again. I think a lot of people aren't going to come through this. I think that, it would be nice, for example, to see the city of Paris getting more involved with this. And if the government has its hands full, the national government has its hands full with this stuff. But I think that for me, what I would do, depending, when they think they will let the restaurants open, now they pushed it back to June, that they're going to stay closed. I would be planning a restaurant festival during the summer, and I think the city of Paris should put a huge amount of money into it. And I don't think we'll have the foreign travelers coming to France very much this year, maybe until the autumn. So we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to have a good time by ourselves here, which we're good at doing. So let's have a Paris restaurant festival.
What do you mean by festival? You mean like a kind of Mardi Gras thing where everyone's out on the street throwing food?
Well, the government wouldn't want to hear us sing that. They want us to keep the social distancing going. No, but I would say, it would be buy one meal, the city of Paris will pay for your friend, or something like that. I mean, a special thing where there's money. I mean, there are lots of ways to invent a product like that. Just saying, because it's not just the restaurant owners, it's all of us. All of us are earning a lot less money than we did in all likelihood a year ago. So if you said you pay for one meal, come as two, pay for half the bill, the rest of the bill will be picked up by, I don't know, a big wine company, a big champagne house, a luxury house, some of the city of Paris. There are lots of ways of thinking this through, and I hope that people are actually thinking about this because we're going to lose the whole tourist season. And these guys and these women, they need our help. And I think we all have to really knock our heads together and think about what we can do to help them.
What about you on a personal level? You obviously can't do your typical job right now. How are you? Like, what are you doing?
Well, in an odd way, I don't think my editor at Houghton Mifflin, which is a venerable publishing house in America, will likely hear this, so I'll answer your question honestly. I just finished up a new book. So all of a sudden having the time to, go back and forth, the ricochet of the back and forth of the manuscript. She's a really brilliant and very demanding editor. And so right when this happened, I'd gotten her major edit back with a whole lot more work for me to do. So I did that. That took a month. Then she decided she wanted another chapter. So that took another, So I've been really working very hard on this book, which is coming out next spring. And in a very peculiar way, and again, I wouldn't dream of saying there is no happy line, there's no silver lining to this. But I would only say I'm taking good advantage of this available time, and it's made my life, frankly, a little bit easier because to write a book and work full time is really hard to do. I mean, I heard that charming podcast that you did with Lindsay Tremuta the other day, and Lindsay and I are in the same boat because our lives are so similar, and we both are writer journalists. She does books and writes for a whole bunch of different publications like I do. It's a lot of work to keep those balls up in the air at the same time. It's really hard. So the magazine and newspaper work has gone sort of slack. So I've really had a lot more time to work on my books.
Have we got a name for the book? Are we promoting that yet? Your new one?
Sure. It's called My Place at the Table. And it's a gastronomic coming-of-age story, which is, I think that the most interesting thing in a life is not it's the arc of a life. I mean, where did you start and where did you get to, and what happened between the two things? A lot of books about Paris and foreigners who live here are celebrations of my gorgeous life in Paris. I don't want to read about that. What fascinates me is how and why did you end up here? Sure. So my book is, how does a shy bookworm kid in Connecticut suburbs end up being a food writer in Paris? I mean, it was there was no map to have this life, like your life for that matter. That's what's so fun about being here. And that's what's so fun about meeting other people like you, and other people who just made these choices. We've taken chances on stuff. I mean, I get lots of letters from people all the time saying, "Oh, how cool. I'd love to have your life, a food writer in Paris. How did you do that?" And I think, well, let's see. I broke some laws. There were drugs involved. I mean, I go a lot of really bad relationships.
Yeah, sure. I think journeys without maps are the most interesting ones.
That's a beautiful phrase, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think a life well lived is kind of like that. I think that we've lived in a world that people want to know the outcome even before they've started the process. I mean, I want to have I'm not talking about me at all. I mean, I was a English literature major in university, and then I lived in London, and then I lived in New York. But the moment where you finally decide you're not going to be dutiful about stuff anymore, that you really are just going to go for it and take chances. And, when I quit my job as an editor at Random House, which is a famous publisher in America, my parents I thought my parents were going to bundle me into a straitjacket and take me off to a mental hospital. My father's expression, "You did what?" And since I'm the eldest of four, I'm supposed to be setting a good example. And throwing over a really good job was not what anybody had in mind.
I'm going to get my hands on your book as soon as it comes out. I want to hear these secrets of...
I'll send you one, Oliver, when it's...
Oh, you're very kind. Maybe we can do a book exchange on a basket down from your window on the 5th floor.
That would be great as soon as I have it.
I want to finish on 2 quick questions.
Sure.
One is, it's kind of a stupid question, but down along the boulevard that separates you and I, there's a lot of these like kebab shops with meat hanging basically on the street. Are those places always a bad idea?
I don't think so at all. I mean, this is something that amuses me. I was in a supermarket right before the lockdown buying a frozen pizza, and all of a sudden I heard, way lost in my own thoughts, and I heard somebody standing behind me in the queue say, "Oh my God, Alec Lobrano is buying a frozen pizza." And at first I thought, did I just think this in my own head? And I turned around at somebody I didn't recognize, but who'd recognized me. And she said, "I can't believe you're buying a frozen pizza." And I said, "Well, you know what? I am actually buying a frozen pizza, and this is the only good brand of them, and I recommend them to you. And I eat at all levels of the food chain. To eat only 3-star food would be a nightmare." So, yeah, I'm always on the lookout for a good kebab. And I eat everything. I'm a real omnivore. I eat...
Cool. That's cool.
Junk food, and I love, like most people from New World countries with immigration, that's something I love about our food, New World food traditions. I love all the ethnic food. I mean, I miss it desperately. I still don't think it's as good here as it is in Sydney or New York or LA or London or whatever. And nice doner kebab is, a thing of joy. If you have a good address, email it to
No, I
me.
don't. I'm the opposite because when I walk past them and I see the meat and I see it so close to the street, I'm not fussy. I would eat anything really, but I see the meat spinning so close to that boulevard, especially,
Right.
and I'm like, I don't want that food. Am I crazy? I feel like
I think that, I mean, when you're hungry, you're hungry. I think for me, I know how to read even like a snack stand. I mean, there's certain things when I wouldn't go out to any of those things.
yeah.
But you can kind of tell by looking at how fresh for example, the garnishes are in the garnishing case. If the lettuce is all brown, I would never order the thing.
Yeah.
If it doesn't look clean, if the people don't, I mean, you can tell when people are proud of their work, whatever job they're doing. And,
it's like you put on a nice shirt for today's Zoom interview. I can tell you're proud of your work.
Well, this is the last ironed shirt that and as I said, the next time I speak to you, I'll just wear the same stained T-shirt. But no, I think that, I mean, I think you can tell with, it could be a hole in the wall place, but I understand your reluctance. And yeah, I mean, when the food's open to you, all that diesel exhaust and stuff, it's not nice. But I'm sure, I don't know, I don't have one to recommend, but I think with all those doner kebab shops up there in the what's the Sex District, there must be one or two good ones. We'll have to find out one day.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which is probably one you've been asked a lot, but not in this way. It's imagine that tomorrow this whole lockdown's over, every single restaurant's open again, just like they were in the old days. And for some reason, that you have to go out of Paris again, right, the next day. So you got one last dinner in one restaurant of your choice. Which would it be and why?
I think I would go to, I'd stay in my neighborhood because, they're places that I love. I love traditional bistro food, but it's become luxury food now because there's so few of those places left. There's a restaurant in our neighborhood called Le Bon Georges. I don't know if you've ever noticed it or not. It's in the Rue Saint-Georges. And it's gotten a little expensive, but it's only about 15 years old. It's a young guy who started it up. He used to work for a big food company. He quit. His dream was to open a restaurant. He's got great wine. The food is simple. It's really, really good. He's got great meat, good chef, really fun people working there. Sassy, young, wisecrack. It's just a great time. It's a real neighborhood restaurant, and I'd go up to Le Bon Georges in a heartbeat.
Whereabouts is it exactly on the street so I can picture it?
Well, you know what the metro is in the Place Saint-Georges there? It's between that bit and the going down the hill to the Rue Saint-Lazare.
Okay. So
it's about 1.5 block down the hill. And it's walking down toward me. That would be on your right.
Yeah.
And it's got a really pretty tiled facade, old-fashioned looking tiled facade.
The whole area is kind of bopping, Every time I walk down that street, or well, not lately, but previously, I'm always like, this is a place that you want to be hanging out.
That street is turning into a real food street. I mean, it's a really great, and Benoit, the owner, first time I ever went there, I was having dinner with a friend from Washington, D.C. in America, who was speaking English, and he came to the table with me and started speaking to us in English, and his English was perfect. And I said, your English is great. Where did you? And he said, I used to work for the Campbell Soup Company, which is the biggest soup company in the U.S.
Yeah.
We kind of looked at him and went, what? And he said, they bought one of the big soup companies in France. So I used to have to spend time in Camden, New Jersey, which is a miserable industrial city across the Chico River from Philadelphia. And we ended up, we were blown away by this story. This kid, and he said, this is what I was doing, and this is my dream. And it's just a beautiful story. He's so passionate about what he does, and he loves people. And I think that, that's what a good restaurateur and a good restaurant critic or food writer, you do the work because you like other people too. It's it's a pretext to get to dig into other people's lives and ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. I think you'd be an interesting man to sit across a dinner table from in a Paris bistro.
I look forward to that, Oliver.
I look forward to it too. But thank you for your time, and I hope, as everybody else does, that the dinners in Paris will be back on the menu again soon.
Me too.
Great. Well, thanks again.
You take care.
Well, there you have it. That was Alec Lobrano. Find his website, alexanderlobrano.com. It's all in the show notes if you can't spell it, but it's not Alec, it's alexanderlobrano.com. And loads of beautiful pictures. You can find out a lot more about his upcoming book, My Place at the Table. Go and check it out. Link in the show notes. Yes, I think you get the picture by now. So I'll keep it short. Since we last spoke, a lot of Paris has opened up, but obviously not the restaurants, which are still a while away. I've moved house. We got a lovely message from Leah Walker from Paris Perfect Rentals. She's been on the show before, and she will be again. She said, Oliver, Lena, you guys are so cooped up in Montmartre. Why don't you come and see the 7th arrondissement, explore this for a change? And then she jangled a pair of keys. Well, this was going by email, but you can imagine. And said, why don't you come and stay in one of our apartments for a week? So that's where I am right now. I'm literally sitting on a bed, looking at the Eiffel Tower, which must be about 100 meters away from me. It's wonderful. All that's to say is, if you want to get a glimpse into this world, you should absolutely be following the Eiffel Tower on Instagram, Facebook, and especially YouTube. I realize I never talk about it on the podcast, but I got a pretty thriving YouTube channel where I've been doing pub quizzes every single week of lockdown, and a heck of a lot more. I plan to do some live strolls around the Eiffel Tower without the tourists, because it is fantastically special right now. So thanks again to Leah from Paris Perfect Rentals. She'll be on the show soon talking about holidays to Paris and how we might need to wait a little bit, or maybe not, who knows. Thanks again to Lachlan Cook for sponsoring this episode. Thanks to all who sent in little snippets for the 1 million downloads on this podcast. More on that soon. And thanks to all of you guys who've bought my book, Paris on Air, including Alec Lobrano, who was such a gentleman after we finished chatting. Ordered a book immediately and I went and delivered it to him. What a classy gentleman. Thank you very much for that, Alec. And thanks to the rest of you. If you're in the States, go to theeiffeltower.com/US for more details. If you're anywhere else, theeiffeltower.com/memoir. As for me, it's Monday. I'm working on a really fun chapter of the audiobook for you Patreon supporters. It's the wedding scene. Lots of sound effects. I think if you read it, you'll know what I mean. Lots of music, and it's going to be good. That's going to come out 6 p.m. today, and that means we're near the end of the book. So that's something to look forward to. If you want to become a member, patreon.com/theeiffeltower. I'll see you over there. Otherwise, I'll see you with a new episode very soon. Have a lovely week. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
I just want